The International Christian Embassy Jerusalem is your embassy in the heart of Israel, founded in 1980. From our headquarters in Jerusalem through our branches in over 80 nations and yours in Canada, we seek to challenge the church to take up its scriptural responsibility, to remind Israel of the promises made to her in the Bible, and to be a source of practical assistance to all the people in the land of Israel. On today's program, a theologian educates on the restoration of Israel according to scriptural promise and prophecy, the friendship between Christians and Jews in the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus, a discussion on anti-Israel drives on campus, and a visit to Galilee, a memorial of where Jesus asked Peter to cast his net. Isaiah chapter 43, verses 5 to 7. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will gather you and your children from east and west and from north and south. I will bring my sons and daughters back to Israel from the distant corners of the earth. All who claim me as their God will come, for I have made them for my glory. It was I who created them.
Once again, welcome to this spotlight on Israel. What a joy to speak with you on behalf of the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem, the Canadian branch. I want to share a few thoughts with you today about the restoration of Israel. And first of all, I would like to tell you that the restoration of Israel to the land of Canaan is something that is vouched for in the Word of God that goes way back to Abraham. It is the Apostle Paul in Galatians chapter 3 that says the Abrahamic covenant cannot be annulled and it cannot be abolished in any way. He said that even men, when they sign contracts and seal documents of sale, they don't go back afterwards and change them. And Paul the Apostle says that the promises that God made to Israel and the Jewish people in the Abrahamic covenant cannot be annulled. And again, the writer of the book of Hebrews in chapter 6, in encouraging Messianic Jews, believers from the Jewish world in the first century who had accepted Jesus, he says to them they can know that God is faithful to them and that He loves them and will keep faith with them because of the promises of God to Abraham. And then the writer says that God, by two immutable things, by which it is impossible for God to lie, by His word and by His character, He gave the promises to Abraham. And these promises include the promise of land. And whenever the Jewish people have come back to the land of Canaan, there's been a conflict, there's been an uprising. There's been a desire to disinvest them of the land and to remove it from them. A tiny piece of land that is no bigger than a game reserve in South Africa. The whole thing is ridiculous at first glance. But ladies and gentlemen, the root of this conflict does not lie in a political dispute or some type of debate about colonialism that took place as a consequence of the aftermath of the First World War. This debate has to do with an ideology, a radical, militant Islamic ideology that actually says that any piece of land that was once under the heel of Islam, under its domination and sovereignty, can never return to those who formerly held it. And if it does, it constitutes a charge of apostasy over Islam. For more than 800 years, the land of Israel was under the dominance and the sovereignty of Islam in many ways, but finally under the Turkish Ottoman Empire. The establishment of the nation of Israel in the heartland of Islam was something theologically that for militant and radical Islam cannot take place. It must be reversed. And if we ignore this major pillar in this conflict, and we make as if it doesn't exist, when all the time it's the elephant in the room, we will find ourselves, by political correctness, supporting an agenda for the destruction and the murder of the Jewish people. It is not by coincidence that the actual constitution of Iran is apocalyptic. The constitution of Iran demands of the Iranian people that they liquidate the state of Israel on Islamic grounds. Now, this is the truth of the conflict. We have to understand that. And building into that is then this whole question of the boycott, disinvestment, sanction campaign that actually started in Canada, in Toronto. This campaign has as its agenda not a two-state solution, not a one-state solution, but a complete dismantling of the Jewish state. It is rooted in anti-Semitism. It is therefore so depressing and awful to see Christian churches aligning themselves with a militant, radical Islamic agenda for the destruction of Israel and ignoring it in every one of their statements and their press releases, as if it doesn't exist, when the Charter of the Palestinian Authority continues to call for the destruction of Israel, and the Charter of Hamas calls for the destruction of Israel and the murder of every Jew. It is shameful, absolutely shameful, that Christian churches can ally themselves with such an agenda. We need to pray for the church, because once again, it is betraying the Jewish people and playing into the hands of a radical Islamic agenda for their murder. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to think about this. You cannot ignore it. You cannot leave it. It is an urgent matter that must be addressed, and this doesn't mean that every Muslim is evil or wicked, but there is a raging, militant, radical Islam in the Middle East today that is killing and beheading Christians and has in its gun sights the Jewish people. Here in Canada, the church needs to be praying about this. People need to wake up about it. We need to rethink our agenda of boycotting Israel, delegitimizing Israel, discrediting Israel, because we play into the hands of people who, in the end, by their radical, militant philosophy, will even come for the Christian church and are. May God help us. May God help us to serve the truth.
I'm with Josh Reinstein. He's the director of the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus. And where are we right now? We're outside of the Knesset and in front of this beautiful sculptured menorah. Josh, great to see you again in the land.
Hey, Donna, welcome to Israel. Welcome home.
Thank you. Josh, some people are still not aware of what the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus is. It's been around for 10 years. Would you like to tell our viewers about the purpose of the Knesset and your role in it?
Absolutely. We started the Knesset Christian Allies Caucus in 2004 in an effort to reach out to Christian leaders, both pastors and leaders of organizations, but as well political leaders in the Christian community. And we didn't realize there'd be such a storm of support for the actions that we did. And today, because of the activities through our foundation, the Israel Allies Foundation around the world, is we have now 34 Israel Allies Caucuses in parliaments around the world, including.
That's excellent.
It's amazing. we have in Canada, we have in the United States. We have 14 in Europe, governments around Europe, in Africa, South America, Asia. And this is a network of over 1,000 parliamentarians.
And Costa Rica is one of those new ones, are they not?
Absolutely, yeah. They just recently started one in Costa Rica, a very pro-Israel country, and we're excited to have that as well.
Right. So what have you seen over the years with Christian-Jewish relations then in your role?
Well, we see Jews and Christians working together in an unprecedented burst of activity. Today we have cooperation at the political level, the interfaith level, financial support through organizations like the Christian Embassy. And it's something that is just growing and growing because we realize that only Jews and Christians put values and beliefs ahead of economic and political concerns. So that really leaves Jews and Christians who are going to stand together against issues that we see around the world, like the rise of radical Islam, anti-Israel sentiment, things of that effect.
Now, you have come to Canada. You're actually Toronto-born.
That's right.
So, but every 2 years you come and you bring a delegation with you of the members of Knesset that are a part of the caucus. We're looking forward to having you in Toronto and area in next May, or this coming May. What would be your plans then?
Well, we come every 2 years with members of the Knesset. Our caucus is made up of 18 members of Knesset from 7 political parties, left to right, religious, secular, and we bring one from the coalition, one from the opposition, and we meet with the Canadian Christian community. We meet with the Christian grassroots, we meet with the Christian leadership, but we also meet with the Christian parliamentarians and also secular parliamentarians who are standing with Israel. And now, after the latest elections, we're excited to relaunch the Canadian Israel Allies Caucus in the Parliament.
That's exciting.
Absolutely. We've seen incredible support from Canada. We expect it to continue.
Excellent. And is there anything else that you'd like to say about the future of the Knesset, Christian Allies Caucus?
I think that as this relationship grows, we're seeing key organizations and leaders around the world. And I wanted to thank you, Donna, for the work that you're doing through the Christian Embassy, but also through the political advocacy through this TV show. Getting the truth out there is the best defense we have. We believe in Israel in human rights, in democracy, in freedom. We have gender equality for men and women. We have religious freedoms for all religions in Israel. And unfortunately, that message isn't getting out there. And those who are against human rights, those who are against democracy, are winning the battle for public opinion. In the university campuses in Canada, in the media in Canada, all over the world, we're seeing that for some reason, those who are against these universal freedoms and values are winning this debate. And it's because we don't get the information out. So I want to thank you for this initiative. And I want to thank Christians around the world who are standing strong with Israel.
Excellent. And Christians in Canada, how would they get to be more involved with the work?
Well, I think it's important to reach out to the organizations that we work with in Canada, the Christian Embassy, Bridges for Peace. Julie Gambelli has a church in Vancouver, and he's leading the delegation in May, and see how we can work together. I'm sure there's information on this show that you can get to you. Right. And you would be a great access point for volunteers who really want to speak the truth, but also just to watch the show, get the real information, and tell your friends and family about it. And the number one thing you can do, well, I guess the second thing you can do is to come to Israel and see it for yourself.
That's the best thing to do, is come to Israel. And once you do, you'll have to return time and time again. And Reverend Giulio Gabelli is our director in Canada for the Canada Celebrates Israel, and we will be hosting you and looking forward to it.
Well, we're excited to go to Canada. Yeah. We hope that the Jays do well this year like they did last year.
Okay, all right. It was great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh.
Up next, a panel examining anti-Israel drives on campus.
Welcome to our panel discussion. We're talking about anti-Israel drives on campus. Now we're taking an educational inside look. We're asking questions like, who's behind it? What are some of the responses that we're getting to it, for example, from the administration? Our guests, Bill Smythe, Marion Walters, and Bob Mayton. Now, Bill, I'm going to start with you. What's often presented, these anti-Israel drives, it's presented as a free speech issue on campus. You've got the Israel apartheid week going on, the boycotts and divestments, and it's being presented as we have every right to express how we feel about how the Palestinian people are being treated. This is free speech. But when one stands back and looks at the situation, who, first of all, is really behind this? Because it's being presented as a social justice issue. But let's dig deeper. Who's behind this?
Well, I think perhaps it begins with the Muslim groups on campus who have an agenda. Their agenda is, in general, the removal of the State of Israel.
Okay, I'm going to back you up here about removal of the State of Israel, because people here in our society, a Muslim group, destroying the State of Israel. How did you get from there to there? But I want people to understand exactly where you're coming from. Now, you're referring to the Muslim Student Associations, the Palestinian Solidarity Networks, and just
Students
give a very brief
Palestine.
Background. They are linked to the Muslim Brotherhood, that's established.
Yes.
They gave rise to the Islamic Society of North America, not the other way around, and they are aggressive groups on campus, and you're indicating the agenda now.
That's right. They, for example, the Muslim Students Association got funding from Saudi Arabia initially, and probably still does. They're at all major universities in the USA and Canada. They certainly get financial support from outside of the university. They are, and the Students for Justice in Palestine have, in the last few years, been involved in all sorts of illegal activities in universities, including, in particular, the denial of free speech to those who want to come on campus and give another point of view.
Okay.
And these events, as we do create, at that time particularly, a lot of anti-Jew behavior, a lot of discrimination. And the students should not be the one, the Jewish students should not be the ones who have to stand up to this. It's up to the administrations to take a stand, at least a moral stand. I mean, they do often say it's a matter of free speech, but it's only for the Jews. It's only for the Jewish group. All the other minority groups, sensitivity trumps free speech. You would not see a slur put on a black student's dorm room door and then they say, oh, well, that's free speech. It would never happen.
I want to get back to you on some of what you've seen and how this hate might be manifested, but there's one thing that we need to say as well. There are many Muslim students that go to school, they're on the campuses trying to get their degree, and they're not involved at all in any agenda. So we need to make that clear. We're not referring to all Muslim students by any stretch, but we are talking about a specific drive that we see on the campuses where it is proven that there are links to the Muslim Brotherhood. This is the kind of issue that we're dealing with here. Now Bob, your point of view and your view on this.
My point of view is that the universities provide the leadership in our society. And when these things happen in the universities, it filters out and permeates the rest of the society. And there is a growth of anti-Semitism, what some people call Jew hatred, in society right now. And the universities are teaching paradigms and theories which are very problematic. For example, postmodernism, which divides the world into oppressors and the oppressed, and blames Western civilization for most of the ills of the world, and says that the rest of the world is the victim of this and are oppressed by this. And Israel being in the center of the Middle East, as a representative or as a proxy for Western civilization, I think a lot of people have interpreted that because of the postmodern paradigm as the problem, that Israel is the problem in the Middle East because Israel is a representative of the oppressive Western civilization represented in the Middle East. And I think that's really totally wrong. I think that Western society, because of what's been happening in the universities, that our Western civilization is losing its courage, losing its identity, and is being overwhelmed by these identities, which are very strong, but which are really, in essence, very oppressive. And I think the universities need to reconsider the approach that they're taking to these educational issues.
What you're talking here is very important because it also relates to liberation theology. Now, there's an important document, I'm going to say very briefly, called the Kairos document, and this applied to South Africa under apartheid. And that notion of oppressed oppressor, that was a real example of oppressed and oppressor. And under that Kairos document, of course, the oppressed were the black South Africans, and the oppressors was the white establishment under apartheid. But fast forward that, there came a document called Kairos Palestine, where there was also considered the oppressed and the oppressor. Unfortunately, this was a wrong document where Israel was now dubbed the oppressor and the Palestinians the oppressed. And they made a comparison to that South African model, calling Israel the apartheid state under Kairos Palestine. So this is something that is very important, what you're saying about this. And it's operational in the churches, Bob.
It is.
Very much, because you've got someone that's oppressed, you've got an oppressor, and Christians are caring. So they buy into this without questioning.
And you've raised, Christine, another issue, which is, you mentioned the word how you feel is so important. This is another aspect of postmodernism. Rational argument is not really considered to be very important. It's how you feel about things, and a lot of these groups, they don't want to engage in debate. They don't want to win an argument. What they want to do is end the debate. And so you see a lot of demonstrations where they prevent people from going into meetings where speakers that they disagree with are speaking, or they'll take over the meeting with chanting and prevent people from hearing. This is oppositional to free speech,
Yes.
And is in itself oppressive. And this starts in the universities. And I think it's really problematic. I think, as you've said, the administrations need to take care of this.
Yes, we're running out of time, so I'd like you, the two of you, if you will, to give us some examples very quickly on what the Jewish students are facing on the campus.
Well, I mean, there's a lot in the press. At McMaster is the only place that I've seen it, and one of the things is they do dance around with the slogan, Palestine will be free should be free from the river to the sea. But they're slogans painted on their doors. They're, some cases have actually been pushed or assaulted, spit upon from a balcony in the student center. I mean, they're not usually life-threatening events.
Checkpoints set up, but these things make the news?
Yes, I have heard of that, certainly heard of that. But there was a recent event at the University of California. The Board of Regents there has come out with a statement. It took a long time to get there, but it recognizes that there's anti-Semitism on the campus, that it's discrimination just like racism or sexism, and furthermore, and the most important thing, it formally acknowledges that there's blatant anti-Semitism within anti-Zionism, and that anti-Zionism incites Jew hate.
Now, we're pretty much out of time here, so I'm going to put this last question to you, and it's a big question, so I'm asking you if you can answer it as short as possible. This issue about, it's free speech. There's something called the new anti-Semitism that says, it criticizes the state of Israel, and the defense is, well, we can criticize the state of Israel, but it goes beyond that, and I'd like you to finish up by discussing this issue about new anti-Semitism quickly and why these drives are a problem.
Well, I mean, I think Bob put it very well. It's perfectly all right if you suppress the free speech of people that you choose to look at as being victims. But the university seems to, and the university seems to go along with that. Certainly at McMaster University, we have tried to interest the administration in adopting a policy that would deal with anti-Semitism on campus in conjunction with the report that came out several years ago on this subject from the Canadian Parliament, and there was no interest at all. We also tried to interest the Council of Ontario Universities in taking a stand on this, and we got a one-sentence response to our detailed letter to them. So it's a real difficulty, but I think Bob is correct that the university is at the heart of it. If the university will not at least take a stand on these matters, then the situation will just go on and will get worse.
It comes down to Israel's right to exist. It's a defensive issue, and this is the key issue that is not being adhered to, not being listened to, and there's absolutely no debate that you could say is solid on the other side to explain why is it in the Hamas charter, why is it in the Palestinian Authority charter, in the Fatah charters, why is it there to obliterate Israel, but these are not issues that are addressed. On this occupation, why is that not addressed on why Israel has to have military there?
When you have one side wanting to push the other side into the sea, how can you possibly have peace? I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
And we're going to have to close on that note.
Then he got into one of the boats, which was Simon's, and asked him to put out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the multitudes from the boat. When he had stopped speaking, he said to Simon, "Launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." But Simon answered and said to him, "Master, we have toiled all night and caught nothing. Nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net."
Donna, when you pick up a book to read, you want to check is it sports or cooking or novel. Well, this is Duc and Altum. So Duc and Altum are the words Jesus says to Peter after Peter allowed him to preach from his boat because the crowds were so big. And once he's finished, Jesus says to Peter, Duc in Altum, go out into the deep. What does Peter say? Master, we were fishing all night. It's not worth the while. It's not worth our effort, But this idea of Ducan Altum, this is the theme here of this building. You go to Mount Tabor, it's the transfiguration.
Right.
You go to Bethlehem, it's the birth. You go to Calvary, it's the death.
Right.
So there are different mysteries of Christ's life. And here we're watching Christ encouraging Peter to cast his nets, which is what every Christian needs in our time, to have courage to cast the nets.
That's right.
To bring the message of reconciliation, a message of universal brotherhood, and a message of servant leadership. All these wonderful messages that come from the heart of Christ, a message of forgiveness and mercy. So this whole building then is going to help us to recall people who were with Christ in his very first community here in Galilee, to have courage to go out and cast their nets. And therefore it's encouraging us to be open to be sent out by Christ to be his apostles.
It's a great message.
We conclude our program today with some sights and sounds within Israel. In consideration of Canada's 150th birthday, please consider 150 ways to bless Israel through your Christian embassy, the ICEJ Canada. Consider becoming a $150 monthly donor. Plant 150 trees, 150 prayers for Israel. The opportunities are endless. Please contact us. Thank you for joining us today, and be sure to visit our website at www.icejcanada.tv or call us at 1-866-324-9133. Through your contribution to ICEJ Canada, you can participate by giving to Haifa Home for Holocaust Survivors, Women at Risk, Red Carpet Project, Operation Life Shield, Bomb-Proof Shelters, Shoulder to Shoulder, Alias Support, Beth Singer Children's Home, Israel in Crisis, ICEJ Communication Media Fund, Christian Friends of Yad Vashem, Magen David Adom Emergency Services, Canada Israel Young Adult Scholarship, Equip and Teach, Bet Rachel Strauss Inclusive Community, Gift, Estate, and Securities Funds.